Well, thank you so much for joining us. Actually, this is quite shocking development for not only people abroad, but for many even in Ukraine. Nobody actually, figure out on the night of the arrest that this thing would even happen. Do you think that this shocking development is really a good thing, meaning that we didn't expect, meaning that the investigation worked well? Or, as some critics point out, that the whole case is really haphazardly put together, and there's a huge fear that it will fall apart in coming hours or days?
Well, first of all, I would like to emphasize that this is an extraordinary event in Ukraine. For 25 years of independence of Ukraine, we didn't have such a situation when the acting minister or the person on the level of the minister would be issued a notification of suspicion. Mm-hmm. And there were some detention of some senior officials, but this is the first so-called big fish. Mm-hmm. And I'm very happy that this big fish happened to be head of the Fiscal Service of Ukraine, Nasirov. Mm-hmm. The reason for that is that there are very many questions to his agency and to the lack of reform of their customs and taxation in Ukraine. So, to put it in one simple sentence, Fiscal Service of Ukraine continues to be the money laundering machine and the resource for dirty cash, which is poured into the elections.
But this is as well a huge victory, at least symbolic by now, because again, this is not the done deal. The person is not behind bars, and there is even not a major development. But this could be a major deal for newly established anti-corruption bureau, because this is their first high-profile case, and this is their first high-profile arrest. But do you think that they have enough resources? Because we've been hearing about chronic understaffing issues inside the bureau. Whether or not do you think they will be able to handle this case properly? Because again, this is quite major.
I can't assess evidence now, as I didn't look the file of the case. However, if the case will be dumped or there will be some problems with the case, I think the key reason would be the court system. And the key threat would be court system and judicial system. Because NABU alone, even NABU with anti-corruption prosecutors, they cannot convict person. Mm-hmm. They can't confiscate person. They can't even detain person without the permission of the court. And for the months which we are monitoring the activity of NABU and the procedure of cases in the courts, we see that judges are reluctant even to start hearings of the cases developed by NABU.
So they can put it together and send it to a court and lose a battle in the court.
And lose the battle in the court, not because the evidence is weak, mm-hmm. but because the court is biased, of law integrity, the court is unprotected, the judge is afraid of political pressure, or physical pressure, and all that other stuff. So while we have new people in National Anti-Corruption Bureau, mm-hmm. new detectives, transparent procedure of selection of them, head of NABU, while we have new people in anti-corruption prosecution and the same transparent selection of the NABU, of special anti-corruption prosecutors, we still rely on unreformed judiciary and the old and on the judges which were appointed by President Yanukovych.
Could it be a symbolic victory for anti-corruption movement, just the whole fact of the arrest, or that this person, he lost his job just because of this development, despite if they even lose in the court?
It is very symbolic, positive development. One more important argument why it is very important step forward is that Nasirov is very closely connected to President Poroshenko. So before he headed the state fiscal administration, he was the head of the customs committee from Poroshenko bloc. Before that, he was assistant of one of the members of parliament from Poroshenko bloc. Therefore, Nasirov himself appeared to head this very lucrative agency because of the political will of the president of Ukraine.
He antagonized a lot of reformers. By the way, the Odessa team and customs, very corrupt, dealing with very corrupt situation, were laid off just because of his pressure. Is that right?
Absolutely. He was attacking and undermining all possible attempts coming from reformers to change the tax administration and to tax the customs service. Therefore, he was simply protecting this very traditional corrupt system of taxation in Ukraine and of customs service. Disregarding absolute criticism of Nasirov coming from international organizations, including IMF, disregarding constant criticism of Nasirov coming from local organizations and institutions and politicians. Our organization, the Corruption Action Center, we filed a criminal case against Nasirov a year ago for him not declaring his apartments in London, right? So he is already known to be as a very big professional, but a very strong protector of corrupt interests, with ties to President Poroshenko. And for me, it's a very positive signal that NABU, disregarding that Nasirov is very close to Poroshenko, once having enough evidence, triggered the case and was ready to detain the guy.
Well, it's not actually huge news that the team of President Poroshenko or people close to the presidential administration there are, including by Hromadske investigative reporting, were exposed of corrupt ties or accused of corrupt activities. But at the same time, just help me with my cynicism. We still have very strong system of this, rent-seeking between oligarchs in the states. The system is corrupt. The system is placed. Some people in the inside new government or in presidential administration help to sustain the system. How did that happen? That a person who is so critically important for that system and who's so close to president suddenly is faced with an arrest? If I would be a cynic, I would say that probably he's not so much important to the ruling elites anymore. Or do you think that we're seeing the tipping balance between this anti-corruption system finally, starting working?
We are so got used to constant mistrust and constant promises coming from law enforcement officials and from politicians that we can't even imagine that it's possible that really there is independent agency which collected enough evidence to trigger case against a guy with the level of the minister, against the guy who is the head of the fiscal service of Ukraine. And I will give you one example why I think we have a positive scenario, why I think this is the case which indicates that NABU is quite independent and strong enough and motivated enough to touch untouchable. Just a week ago on Thursday, there was an attempt in the parliament to appoint, in violation all sorts of rules of procedure, in violation of all standards of transparency, to appoint the auditor of NABU. The only legal way to get rid of Sitnik, the current director of NABU, is to conduct external audit, which will end up with negative conclusion. And such kind of audit should and will be conducted by 3 auditors, one appointed by parliament, one by president, and one by government. So while there was already conducted a transparent selective competition by anti-corruption committee in parliament, and back in December last year, there was a winner of this competition, Robert Storch, the acting deputy, the current deputy of the Inspector General Office of Department of Justice in the United States. Suddenly, in the parliament appears unknown British citizen Nigel Brown, who happens to arrive in Ukraine for his private business, as he told in the parliament, found out suddenly that there is NABU audit coming, and suddenly appeared in the parliament exactly at the date when there was a vote on this issue. So it was clear indication that Poroshenko bloc, jointly with Narodny Front, were trying to gather enough votes and to quickly vote for this guy as an auditor, disregarding that there was another one, very strong guy, supported by the US Embassy. Mm-hmm. So, and this candidacy, Nigel Brown, he was a joint candidacy of Poroshenko bloc and Narodny Front.
To undermine, in your opinion, the system of National Anti-Corruption Bureau?
To get rid of Sitnik. Mm-hmm. Simply to use audit as a legal tool to dismiss current director of National Anti-Corruption Bureau, who is ready enough and who is willing to trigger cases against those who have very close ties to influential politicians in Ukraine, including Poroshenko. So I will judge, and I would recommend everyone to judge whether it's political or not. I mean, the investigation against Nasirov on action of Poroshenko and Poroshenko bloc in respect to NABU audit. If they will appoint really independent auditors, strong professionals with international experience, it would mean that they support independence of NABU. Mm-hmm. If not, it would mean that especially this case of Nasirov is threatening them a lot, and they are trying to do everything possible to get rid of NABU.
Well, a number of key developments to keep a close eye on. Thank you so much for explaining the recent development. Thank you for coming.